individual attorneys. We've had a lot of luck though as practices have come together to do their social media. So we have a group that works on payment law, and it's probably one of the more successful blogs and social media campaigns that we have because they are constantly as a team getting information out there quickly. They're pointing to client work, they're pointing to things that are happening in the industry, and I don't know how you guys feel about that, but at least from our standpoint, it works. It's not calling out one individual, but it's certainly talking about an area. And
how many of them participate? Like what percentage of the group?
Sure, so it's kind of a small group. I'd say that there are 4 or 5 of them that are really active on it.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it works for them. I don't know that it could work for everyone, but at least in our case, we've had luck with that. And it shares the burden, right?
Yeah.
Trying to get the information out.
I think like, so tying it specifically to a channel like LinkedIn, you could form a group, right? And so you can create a very specific audience of, you know, your desired kind of people, your desired client, and then collectively a practice group or a firm can contribute content on a regular basis to that.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about social media, and what's the best way to actually build your audience? You know, pretty sure a don't is buy Twitter followers, but I'll let the panel.
You stole mine.
Yeah, don't buy Twitter or Facebook followers. You know, you can go to Facebook Insights now, and you can see like the demographic information or geographic location. And so it'd be a real drag if you have 10,000 Facebook likes, and 9,999 of them are from like, you know, Southeast Asia or something like that, right? So clearly don't do that. I think be a resource is how I would say it at a high level. So know your audience, know the information that they want to hear. Because remember, to some degree, like Twitter is just kind of a bullhorn, right? So you're standing on some street corner shouting out information, and eventually people passing by will respond to that, maybe, if it's relevant, if it's right. So I would say that the easiest way is to find your niche and be a resource for your targeted audience.
Yeah, so the first book actually I wrote about social media was Social Media for Lawyers Twitter edition. And I talked about, you know, 2 really important things in building. Because the real challenge on Twitter, and how many of you are on Twitter? Does everyone, I mean, is this a group of Twitter users? I guess a lot of you are. I'm a big fan of Twitter. The problem is when you're starting on Twitter, you can have the most amazing content in the world, but if you don't have any followers, it's gonna take a long, long time to start gaining a following. So to get kind of a critical mass, you've got to follow to be followed. And I know it seems like, I guess it makes sense, right? But you've got to create a good profile that says exactly what you're going to talk about, exactly what you do, and start sharing, and then you've got to just start following people. Follow a few hundred people, and somewhere around 30 to 50% of them will follow you back if you're in the same industry, and that's how you can get started, get your first group of followers. Now, once you have that group, then you need to find some champions within that group, find other people that are also blogging and writing, and these people you can kind of team up with them and share each other's content. And now you have some kind of allies that are working together to help promote each other's content. And I mean, I know that's kind of a lot of work and you have to actually talk to other people, but I thought that was really fun, a really fun part about kind of starting to build my following. And you know, and then once you have a critical mass, you know, and you get the flywheel going, then if you're just a great resource, people will reshare your stuff, and it makes it easier once you get going. But it is tough getting that first, especially on Twitter, getting that following going.
Yeah, follow those influencers and give them a shout. You know,
Yeah.
Share their content. Yeah.
Mary, can I lob in?
Of course, Dan.
So
So polite, that's permission.
It's coming on the heels of the Boston.
Here, what are you?
Oh,
What are you passing the mic?
So I just wanted to do with things. Events and hashtags were huge for me in like building a following. So I came across a couple of events that weren't even happening in the same physical place where I was, but I followed along and I logged in where I could, and I found that to be really powerful. And weirdly, like, the human connections that you make at different events can actually have an effect on your virtual world and vice versa, which it doesn't intuit, but it's actually really the case. And then the second thing I would say, which I know, Lee, we've talked about this a lot, but I haven't heard you guys say this specifically, is engagement. I think that's another key to getting followers, is a lot of people view what's happening here as a conversation. And so if someone says something interesting and you reply with something interesting, if they haven't followed you before, they may now, because now they see that, hey, you're listening, and hey, you're involved in this. And a lot of ways that I got followers was I do that, and then the person that had shared the original message said, that's really interesting, I'd like to share that. So they would share that, and then other people would see that they were sharing my content. And I think if you view it as a conversation, as an engagement, I think that's really key too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, we were talking a little bit before this, that a lot of us were at reInvent Law in New York, and that was almost 2 years ago now. That's where I met Dan. Well, I took down the name of every person, every presenter. I went back, I found them all on Twitter, and I started following every single one of them. And I do that still. I just spoke at Clio's conference, and there's some people who, Joshua Lennon from Clio, if anyone knows him, I'll write him emails, and then I have to go and look at my phone because he'll start a conversation with me back and forth because he likes to use direct message on Twitter more than email. It's infuriating to me, but I know that's the way he works, and he is a huge Twitter person, and you're a pretty big Twitter person.
Well, one of the great things about Twitter, if you think about, if you're walking down the street and you go up to a total stranger and you walk up to them and you say, oh, hey, what do you do for a living, right? They're probably going to look at you like you're crazy, right? But when we're at this networking event, we approach each other as strangers, like, why are you here? What's this all about? And you're pretty open at an event like this to talking to strangers. But Twitter is just like this. Everyone there is open to having conversations with strangers, if you can strike up an interesting conversation. And that's what's just so amazing to me about it, is that you can make these random connections. Anyway.
Yeah, so does anyone think there's anything specific about building that audience that's different in legal that wasn't already covered by the 3 don'ts? Okay. So, Jen, did you want to comment whether, Davis Wright Tremaine, you spend a lot of money on advertising on social media, or?
We've been exploring it. It's not something that we are fully committed to, but around recruiting, it's been helpful for us. So when we, not specific like, hey, we're looking to hire this person, but when we're talking about our firm's culture and putting that out there, it's been helpful. And then when we have events, when we do a lot of events, that has been very helpful when we've purchased social media, or just amp it up, right? Not to go buy followers.
So that's more to build your events and build your audience than actually buying advertising to sell.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, so we're just going to do a quick wrap up. Everyone's going to give one quick best practice or tip, and then we're going to have questions. So whoever has the mic.
So I'll just give one tip for the consumer attorneys, the consumer-facing attorneys. Do social media remarketing. It's probably the cheapest form of paid advertising with the highest conversion rates. We've tested this out over, 70 firms or so, and have really kind of validated that.
Can you explain, what did you mean by that?
What is that?
So you, on Facebook and Twitter specifically, you could set up an ads manager account and set up a remarketing program. So you essentially create what's called a custom audience. You basically drop a tracking pixel onto your blog, your website. People that are visiting your website already demonstrate some kind of intent, right? Like, they're interested in you for one reason or another, but again, maybe they're not ready to buy. And so they go off to Facebook or Twitter, and now they see your banner ads, right? Yeah, just make sure they're not cheesy, they're just call Saul, make sure that they're consistent with your brand, that sort of thing. But oftentimes you're being compared with competitors. And if they're constantly seeing you top of mind when they're ready to purchase, they're going to click on that ad and call you.
Surprised it took us almost an hour for someone to say, just call Saul.
I already got it on Twitter.
Yeah,
just
call Saul.
Okay, whoever.
I just think it's being authentic. We've already touched on that, but find your voice, be consistent with it, and then try and engage with others that have a similar voice.
All right, So best advice. I think that when I talk to lawyers about social media, a lot of them think of social media as this place that they can go and find like some magical person out there that will hire them, and suddenly they'll be this amazing like match, and they'll just bring in a whole bunch of business. And what I've seen is far more effective is for lawyers to create a list, and they can build this list using social media, but of their top 20 relationships, and work those 20 relationships using social media and using all the tools that are out there. Because it's those people that you know that you really cultivate deeper relationships with, that's where you're gonna bring in business, not from the random people that see one tweet, but where you really get to build deeper relationships. And so if you don't have that high level top list, then you know, the random tweets aren't really gonna get you anywhere. So I guess that's my best tip.
Okay, I started simply and I will end simply. So anybody who's heard me speak knows what I'm going to say. Dan knows what I'm going to say. Get a really good freaking headshot. So if you're going to spend time doing this, the internet now, you've probably noticed, has become very visual. So websites now are huge images. People expect pictures. Facebook posts are all pictures now. So you have to think about things visually. And when I go around and speak, it's kind of my favorite party trick. Before I speak, I will go onto Avvo, and it takes me about 15 minutes to find 6 of the most painful headshots that you've ever seen. And it's not because of the people themselves, they're fabulous and gorgeous, it's because their headshot is disastrous. So spend the money, don't have your daughter or son take it with a Polaroid, but it's super, super important. And we have a study that we cite all the time about the physiological reaction to photographs, and it really, really does matter when you're trying to showcase yourself. So
that's a great one, because my favorite is when you go to somebody, and just on LinkedIn even, and they've got like, it's their wedding picture, and they've cut out their husband, or they've cut out their wife, and it's like, okay, what are you thinking? So that's a great tip. Okay, so let's do some questions for about 10 minutes. Anyone have any questions? Okay.
I think that one back there was first.
Yes.
All right. So I guess my question is about, I think a lot of the businesses that use Twitter a lot, I think we've talked about them, they do engage a lot with their consumers, with the people, with their network, I guess. And part of that is talking about their business and giving advice or giving information to their Twitter followers or their Facebook people. And I think as law firms and attorneys, people a lot of times do want some feedback, some about the law a lot of times, especially if you're marketing to consumers. And so is there a way that you guys can think of to walk that sort of fine line? And is it through blog posts? Like without doing some sort of unlicensed or forming like an attorney-client relationship, right? Like how do you provide meaningful information when people are searching for that from people they follow without crossing the line? And do you have tips for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that, you can educate your marketplace generally all you want. You can send them a list of, here's the 10 things you need to do in what order when you get a speeding ticket. You can give those specific instructions. You just can't give the specific instructions in response to a specific question, right? Because you can't apply the law to their specific facts, but you can absolutely teach people exactly what to do. There's no problem with that. I mean, so I always think about it as the perspective of, if you can create the questions, anticipate all the questions that your potential client is going to ask, when they do a Google search or when they look for that information, your answers are going to come up. So that's how I like to think about that.
We did a blog post on from our privacy and security group around like the first 5 things you need to do if you think you've been hacked, and that was a really popular one. And then we were able to go out to that was a blog post, and then we went out to other social media pieces and said, what are the first 5 things you do if you've been hacked? And so it was a shortened version. I think you can do it that way.
And sometimes you'll write an article, you'd be like, this is exactly what people want, and the article will just totally fall flat, and then you write something else you don't even think is going to resonate, and that gets a lot of traffic. So that's why you got to write a lot to find the right stuff that's gonna hit.
And isn't there a way too that you're able to create things that are like PDFs and then you put them in your footers, and then that way, if it's the top 5 tips or whatever, it'll actually put you further up on Google. I'm way outside my area of expertise, but
Yeah.
somebody is.
I would say, so PDFs oftentimes aren't indexed, right, like from an
Yeah.
SEO perspective, so I'd probably put it in a text blog post rather than a PDF. And again, like, listen to your audience, right? So I'm just kind of commenting on what they've already said. Listen to your audience, see what the questions are, and then say, you know, a simple tweet is, I often get asked this question, here's the facts, right, around this. And so you're kind of addressing those specific people without addressing them specifically.
Yeah. And I think Miguel has.
Miguel might have had a question.
Oh yeah, Miguel
Before
was
Adam.
next, then we'll go back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. How effective are some of
Okay.
the social media analytics programs simply measured for like a startup's growth or for a company's growth?
I would say any analytics, whether it's social media or otherwise, is only as effective as the person that's doing the analysis, right? So, like, it's just spitting out data, and you have to kind of know what data is important, what's relevant to your audience, right? So with social media, it's level of engagement, right? Like, it's how many shares certain content pieces get, right? And so you kind of look at this over time, and you can say, well, you know, these pieces of content were duds. These got a lot of reshares. Let me do more of that, right? So you're letting the analytics kind of lead you towards your desired business outcome. That's a simplified version of you know.
Yeah, and I would add to that, you know, you can measure traffic of content that you share, right? But not all content is created equally. So, you know, Kevin O'Keefe wrote an article about how firms need to make sharing like a team sport, or something about how they need to get everybody involved in sharing. And so I reshared his article, and it got a lot of traffic. The next week, I reshared another article that was Star Wars finally got a title. That got like 20 times the traffic as Kevin O'Keefe's article, but the people clicking on the first article, those are the right people. Those are the people I wanted to cater to. And so, you know, it's the analytics that relate to the right stuff to the right people. And that, I think, clicks is actually a very valuable thing if you write very specific content that speaks to your audience. So I look at traffic numbers all the time. I think that's a powerful thing to look at. Yeah.
Speaking of traffic, I live in a very low traffic area of the law, so high-tech intellectual property is very much in the long tail. Abo had a great infographic on the top 50 questions that people ask. Intellectual property didn't even register.
It was 51. It was 51.
No, when I asked about it, it was around 100.
Okay.
That was at like 0.03% of all questions asked. And if you look at the analytics on how often people are searching for the services that my firm will provide, all of our services, I mean, they're in the Seattle geographic region, it's hundreds of Google searches
Yeah.
a month.
Several.
So we get great click-through on some of our paid search ads. We'll get 2 to 5% click-throughs, which are, you know, astronomically good because it's, you know, what people are looking for. How would you modify a social media strategy for a company that's living out the far end of the long tail?
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about social media. I think that you know, Google, it's very difficult with Google because it's hard to really resonate, but with social media, you can find the tribe of people that are interested in that. So you can find, where do those people hang out? And you can find those kind of, so to speak, online events. And that's what having an ongoing blog where you're digging into that, you're building your own audience that is interested in those same types of things. I mean, I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that one.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, if you're reaching that relevant audience and it just happens to be low volume, I think that's fine. If you're not capturing more of that audience, then maybe you have some issues potentially with your funnel, right? So social media is just kind of like one part of the acquisition, but like you have this whole other funnel of engagement, right?
So Seattle is intentionally Luddite in one of its sort of playgrounds where my clients exist. There's a Seattle Tech Startups mailing list, and when they ask for a patent attorney, there'll be 10 referrals. 5 are for me and 5 are for 5 other patent attorneys. But
That's a good ratio.
I
workers' comp guy over here is like 100 referrals. So
No, but it's, you know, I can't help feeling, you know, that there are a lot of other patent attorneys in town. It's like, where are they getting their business? I mean, it's like, I can't help feeling that I could be doing better, but the hunting is so sparse, and there isn't another playground where the CTOs like hang out and shoot the breeze.
Well, and so one opportunity is for you to create the playground. You know, it's like people often saying, oh, should I create a LinkedIn group? No, don't create a LinkedIn group, right? There's a million LinkedIn groups. Create a monthly breakfast series and have a LinkedIn group around that breakfast series. Because the purpose of the group is for everyone to get together, for you to have one great speaker that's gonna be perfect for all these CTOs. And you're just throwing the party to get all these people together and find a great speaker for them. And you know, so that's how I think it could be more effective. You create the playground, you know. Anyway, I know that's not an easy thing to do, but that's kind of correct.
Does anyone else have any questions?
So if you have an organization that's consumer facing and you have a small budget, what do you think the most effective way to spend your budget is to promote your company? Is it through social media? Is it through advertisement? Like, how would you go about allocating them?
I mean, do you have people that are willing to write?
Let's assume not, just because generally speaking, lawyers, broadly speaking, don't really do much outward-facing writing.
Yeah, okay, so besides writing.
what's the problem? What's the problem?
Someone else.
Thanks for tossing the hot potato. Pick up the hot potato. What's the problem?
Okay, so just broadly speaking, I work with nonprofit organizations doing all sorts of legal-age stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a few of them that do writing, that's great. But like if I'm advising them saying like, if you have you know, like $5,000, how should I say is the most effective way to spend that? Is it to get an intern to write some stuff? Is it to get some ads? Is it
So I would, just based on the little that I know about it, so I would try to focus on an organic strategy, right? So getting some interns to generate some content. When you do that though, make sure that the content is relevant again, right? Know your audience, create a demographic and a psychographic profile of who that person is, create an editorial calendar around that ideal audience, so that way you have a strategy, an SEO strategy around the kind of content you're gonna produce over the next quarter. Do it on a quarterly basis. Measure analytics against that content to make sure that it's relevant. The other thing I would do, if you did have some amount of paid budget for a nonprofit group, I'd probably just send them direct mail. Really, like it's kind of old school. I know it's not very like innovative, whatever, but direct mail still works if you do it right. Yeah.
Just wanted to comment on the direct mail. We have a law firm who did an offer with our software, and they did direct mail because when they mail things to their existing clients and it comes in the letter from your law firm, people open it. And we actually had an amazingly high rate of use. The other thing is there's services where you can get blogs written for you. We used one for a while, it's called Blog Mutt. And so they would do the research. Like we told them, okay, we want stories on, as Adam knows, intellectual property. So we said we want horror stories, we want these things. So they went out and they found all this stuff and they wrote. And we didn't really like their writing style, but they were doing the blogs for us. It's super inexpensive. And then we would just add our own personal twist to it, and somebody else was doing the research. It's like $80 a month or something like that. It's super cheap. So
I was gonna say, the other thing you could do is you could also have, if you don't have people that are willing to write, you can create content in other ways. So you can go and interview some of the people that deal with the problems. So have YouTube interviews of people where instead of them having to create the content, they just have to answer your questions. I know someone's gonna have to do the work there, but there's different ways to create that content. Way in the back there?
So you've taken over.
Sorry.
Yes, one last question in the back, because then we need to do the talk.
My friend Kevin Keith is sitting here, you know, what's gonna have him comment on your, comment on, you know what I'm talking about, Joe? You were commenting about the keen insight that this young man had about his blog post about,
I did give him an honorable mention already. So.
No. I mean, he knows some stuff.
No, but I mean, I think Adrian had the best point when I shared before that it is not volume. It has nothing to do with volume. I tell people, that start to blog, if you haven't made a list on your wall, just put a list on the wall of the 20 people that you want to get to know better. Influencers,
We did a thing.
One around, and then what
Yeah.
happens is you connect on LinkedIn, you go have lunch with them. So it's just a matter of connecting the dots and being yourself, but really being more focused on a slice like Adrian said, that 20 people that want to get to know.
Well, thank you from the back. So thank you all for listening, and thank you to our panelists, and again to Avo and Dan for organizing this part of it. And now we're gonna hear, I think, I'm gonna let Dan introduce.